Do not stay in bed for long periods of time awake. In the last hour before bed, try to dim down 50%, if not more, of your light to release a hormone called melatonin. Wear an eye mask, blackout curtains, always good as well. So as I said, there are probably 5 things that you can start doing to try to improve your sleep. First piece of advice, regularity. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, no matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend. Regularity is king. And the reason is because when you feed your brain the signals of timed regularity for your sleep, it will anchor your sleep and improve the quantity and the quality of that sleep. Because part of that signal of regularity going into your brain in terms of that repeated behavior helps train that central 24-hour circadian clock. So that's the first piece of advice. Try to keep it as regular as you possibly can. The second piece of advice is darkness. In my view, we are a dark-deprived society in this modern era, and we need darkness at night, as well you've spoken about, to release a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin will help time the regular onset of your sleep. So that sounds great, but what does that mean? I would suggest the following. In the last hour before bed, try to dim down 50%, if not more, of your lights in your home. And you will be quite surprised at how sleepy and soporific that will make you feel. I will do this in a regimented way. I have a little reminder that pops up and tells me now is the time to dim the lights based on your bedtime. And I'll go around and I'll shut lights down. In my bedroom, I will actually have a smart light bulb, and it is way down to probably maybe 5 lux. And lux is just a metric of the light. It's way down there, and it's also very deep orange, sort of red, and we can come on to why that's the case. So that's the first thing. Even before you're thinking about sleep, start to decrease the light. For example, if you were there at, let's say, for a standard sleep schedule at 10 p.m. and normally you are getting into bed at 10:30 p.m., but you feel pretty wide awake. If there was an electrical blackout and you lost your phone, magnetic too, phone goes down, lights go down, total blackout. My suspicion is that fairly soon you'd say, gosh, I actually feel quite sleepy. Whereas if the lights were blazing, you've got your phone, television's on, lots of stimulation, you're probably going to think 10:30, no, I could probably push through for at least another hour. So try to dissipate that light. And then if you need to, wear an eye mask, blackout curtains, always good as well. But we need that darkness at night, because when you give the brain the signal of darkness, it releases effectively a brake pedal. That brake pedal has normally been applied by way of light on the release of that spigot of melatonin. And when you take the brake pedal off, it starts pumping out into the brain. You can also then, of course, probably reverse engineer this trick in the morning. And this is another component of why you've been, I think, such a wonderful advocate for light in the morning. It does many things, but one of the things that it does is reapply that brake on melatonin, and therefore you lose the signal to your brain of darkness. That's what melatonin in some ways is doing. We often call it the hormone of darkness or the vampire hormone, not necessarily because it makes you look longingly at people's necklines and want to bite in, which is great if you're into that, but it's really simply about it's releasing melatonin, which tells the brain, my goodness, it's nighttime. But if you've got bright light on, you come from your office, you're driving home, so you've got artificial light during the day, which is probably not strong enough to stimulate you and bring you awake. You come home and you've got, again, bright light, but it's still strong enough now to prevent the release of melatonin. You start to shift in your timing and you may have problems with your sleep. So that's the second. piece of advice.
Yeah.
So that would be, so we've spoken about regularity, we've spoken about darkness, and we've spoken about the inverse of that in the morning, which is light, a little bit of cortisol. So the third out of the 5 is going to be temperature. And the advice here is keep it cool. You need to drop your core body temperature and your brain temperature by a little less than 1 degree Celsius, 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, to get to sleep and stay asleep. The general target that we have in sleep science, if you look across the literature, is somewhere around about the 67 degree Fahrenheit, or maybe 18.5-ish degrees Celsius. Now, I know that that sounds cold, and cold it is, but you can also wear thick socks to bed. You can have a hot water bottle at the end of the bed. That's great too, but the ambient must be cold. The 4th piece of advice is walk it out. And here, what I mean is, do not stay in bed for long periods of time awake. And when you are awake in your bed for long stretches of time, because your brain is an incredibly associative device, it will quickly learn that this thing called my bed is the place where I'm awake and not asleep. And what you need to do is break that association. If you've learned that time and time again because you've stayed in bed, and the rule of thumb is just about 20-25 minutes, if you can't fall back asleep or you can't fall asleep, it's okay. Just say, tonight is not my night. Tomorrow is not completely shot. It's fine. I'm just going to get up, get out of bed. If you can, if you're lucky enough, try to go to a different room and in dim light, read a book, listen to a podcast, whatever it is that relaxes you, just do that. Don't check email, don't eat, because if you start eating, that again trains your brain to start waking up and feeding at that time. And only return to bed when you are sleepy. And there is no time limit for that. I don't want you to come back after half an hour when you are still awake and not feeling sleepy enough. Why? Because you're going to get back into bed and be in the same problem again. And gradually, if you do this, and it's hard to do it, you will relearn the association that you had, I'm sure, as a child, which is that your bed is this place of sleepiness. Because often people will be saying, I feel so tired in the evening. And then they get into bed and they say, but now I can't fall asleep at all. And I don't understand it. In part, it's because of that learned association. So that would be the 4th tip. The 5th tip, even more unpopular as a personality and character, which is try to be mindful of your alcohol and caffeine. Try to cut yourself off from caffeine probably at least 10 or so hours before you expect to go to bed, and you can just calculate that. And try to limit it. So the dose and the timing make the poison. Cut yourself off after maybe 2 or 3 cups of coffee, and then that timing component, count yourself back, cut yourself off. Decaffeinated coffee, not too bad if you find the right thing to, if you need that fix. Alcohol is probably one of the most misunderstood sleep aids, in quotes, that there is. It is no sleep aid at all. Now, if I didn't understand what I know about alcohol and sleep, I would think that too, which is, look, when I have a nightcap just before bed or 2, I may actually just fall asleep very easily. It feels like I stay asleep very soundly across the night. So it's a great sleep aid and it really helps me. There are at least, I would say, 3 issues with alcohol. The first is that alcohol is in a class of drugs that we call the sedatives. And sedation is not sleep. But when you take on board alcohol in the evening, you mistake the former for the latter, and you think it helps you fall asleep. The second thing is that because it's sedation, or actually it's probably related to sedation, if I were to show you the electrical signature of your deep sleep when you're just sleeping naturally versus when you have alcohol in your system, it's not really the same. It's not a naturalistic form of deep sleep. It mimics it. It looks not too dissimilar. But if I really do my analyses and I almost like that Pink Floyd album where I take the white light of electrical brain activity coming from your head as you're sleeping and split it apart into all of the different components, there are some components that are no longer present or some that are abnormally present. The second issue with alcohol is that it fragments your sleep. So it will litter your sleep with all these punctuated awakenings throughout the night. The danger there is that many of those awakenings with alcohol you don't remember because they're too brief. But then you wake up the next day and you think, well, I didn't have a problem falling asleep. I didn't have a problem staying asleep. But I feel rough. I just don't feel restored by my sleep. And you don't add 2 and 2 together. The final concern with alcohol is that it's quite a potent blocker of your rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. As to the incredible learning and memory, creativity benefits that come by way of REM sleep, also it's essential for our emotional regulation and recalibrating our moods. So for all of those reasons, I would say 2 things. First, if you are struggling with sleep, not feeling restored by your sleep, keep in mind your alcohol intake, and also just in general, be mindful of that if you are thinking about your sleep and want to preserve it.